Can you imagine infinity? It is human nature to vividly imagine what is comparable to something already seen. For example, the height of mountains can be represented in terms of skyscrapers and towers, and the color features of objects can be named as cherry, lilac, eggplant. Our consciousness automatically correlates it with the fruits and vegetables. In a word, the principle is clear. Then we repeat the question, is it possible to imagine infinity? The first in outer space. The answer is banal. The human mind cannot do this, at least not to the full extent. One of the real-life objects that illustrate infinity can be the location in which everything exists. This is the universe. But perhaps it is still finite. Let's not rush to answer and start with the basics. In fact, the Earth, the Solar System, the Milky Way, millions of other galaxies, and of course, you and I, live in the epicenter of an almost 14 billion-year-long blast wave. According to observations of electromagnetic radiation sent by distant and nearby galaxies, astronomers have long been convinced that visible objects are steadily moving away from each other. In whatever part of the universe the observer is, the effect is the same. Everywhere, the web of stars will scatter from it in different directions, like cracks on a broken windshield. Is there a limit to the expansion of the incredible bubble called the universe? Maybe. But pay attention to the next point. We see objects by the light they emit. That is, terrestrial astronomers are able to observe only those stars and galaxies the rays of which have managed to reach us. Now think about it. If the universe were finite and not too large, then we would see not only the light directed in our direction, but also those rays that, having circled the universe, returned back. In other words, we would see duplicate images of the same objects. By the way, those analogies that are used, applicable to the expanding universe, most of all mislead mankind. For example, often, for better understanding, the macrocosm is compared to a yeast cake, in which the raisins' galaxies move away from each other every moment, or with ants rapidly running in different directions on the surface of an inflated beach ball. These images lead to subconscious associations that the universe is a huge ball that does not have a clearly defined edge, but nevertheless, its space has a certain volume and, as a result, is finite. The only plus that such analogies give is the understanding of a simple truth. The macrocosm is a spatial carpet on which objects lie relatively motionless. Therefore, it is not galaxies that move, but space itself. This is what is constantly expanding. Let's look at the question from the other side. If we cannot imagine something, this does not mean that such a thing does not exist. Let's assume that the universe does have boundaries. And what is beyond them? Emptiness? The snow-white chat of the quiet house? Neighboring universes? We have to admit that these questions will torment the minds of great thinkers and ordinary citizens for a very long time, perhaps forever. By the way, the sages of antiquity also had similar thoughts. For example, Titus Lucretius Carus, in his famous work On the Nature of Things, spoke unambiguously about the infinity of the universe, considering this an obvious fact that does not require proof. But to hell with philosophy. What does astronomy say about this issue? From the point of view of modern science, the finiteness of the universe depends on the index of the critical distribution density of matter. This parameter stands at around 100,000th of the mass of a proton per cubic centimeter of matter. If the density exceeds the critical threshold, then based on the postulates of the theory of relativity, we can conclude that the universe is finite. This indicator demonstrates the isolation of space in itself. Otherwise, when the average density of matter is less than the critical one speaks of the infinity of the macrocosm. Theory is great, but what are the actual observations of astronomers? You'll laugh, but at the moment, the density of matter of the universe is almost equal to the critical one. That is, the question of the limited space of our common home is still open. And here there are two options. Either the calculations are fundamentally wrong due to a lack of information, or being openly laughs at us. The further we look into the depths of space, the more ancient layers of the universe we observe. The Hubble telescope captured the most distant corner of the macrocosm. After analyzing the image, scientists found that the galaxies in this Old Testament area are very young. Logically, looking even further, you can see the first stars and clouds of gas. And then what? Neutral atoms, ionized plasma, free protons and neutrons. Curious about what happened even earlier, the observer would see spontaneous shreds of antimatter and matter, scattered gluons and quarks, everything. There is no further passage. There's a universal brick in the form of an infinitely hot point of singularity. But still, if the archaeologists of space, with an incredible effort, would open the veil of time, then milliseconds before the Big Bang, they would see how space convulsively wriggles in spasms, rapidly expanding. Although the answer to the question of whether the universe is finite has not been given by scientists, it can be assumed that the limitations of our review are the only barrier that does not allow us to look beyond the line. Does that mean space is limitless? Tell us what you think about it. Does our ecumen have limits? Comment, regardless of the time of day or day of the week. Expand the boundaries of the mind.